Hey everyone, it's Dr. Erin here, one of the good doctors of Abbey Research, and I am back with our continuing series, Abbey Research Reads, where we read, because we love to read books, about business, culture, pop culture, you name it, history. And if we feel like there are some relevant points in the book we want to share with you, then we produce one of these handy little videos. So the book I'm talking about today just came out in 2019. It is Fight Like a Mother, book here, How a Grassroots Movement Took on the Gun Lobby and Why Women Will Change the World by Shannon Watts, who is the founder of Moms Demand Action. And I want to start out by saying, obviously, gun control and gun legislation is a very emotionally rife and difficult topic, and one that we don't wade into lightly. But I am a firm believer in common sense gun control and gun legislation, which is necessary to stem the overwhelming tide of gun violence in this country, while respecting people's obviously constitutional rights as well. So this book, I'm a little torn about this book. It's a remarkable story of how to start a grassroots organization, and kind of the trials and tribulations that Shannon went through in deciding to start this group with a Facebook post kind of after the Sandy Hook shooting, school shooting in 2012. And it's based on these 11 principles that are meant to guide you into becoming an activist in your own right or starting an organization. And there are times where I think she's trying to make it more broadly applicable outside of being a mom and starting a grassroots organization, but it doesn't quite come off successfully. The biggest problem I have with it as a single person, or self-partnered, as Emma Watson just coined the other day. Thanks for that, Emma. As a self-partnered person who does not have children, was kind of the exceptionalism of motherhood. She doesn't explicitly state that this book is only for moms, but then she almost exclusively talks to mothers, which is fine. If you want to write a book for moms, that's great. But it didn't explicitly say that it was. And so every time she said, well, you're a mother, or, well, us mothers, we have to stick together, it excluded me from the narrative, because I was like, is this a trait that only mothers have? Is this something only mothers understand? And I know that I'm not a mother, and there are certain experiences and perspectives that come with that I cannot understand. But there were some points where she was talking about unique skills that mothers have, and empathy and caring for others were kind of listed among those. And I think I'm a pretty empathetic person. I'm a caretaker by nature. I don't think you have to be a mother to be a caretaker or to care for others. And she's kind of talking about these traits that are necessary to do what she did. And they're not exclusive to mothers. So that was my biggest kind of sticking point with that, which is something Dr. Donnelly and I come up across pretty regularly, because we're not mothers by choice, and we're probably never going to be mothers in that definitive sense of the word. Throughout the book, there's some really interesting points. Some of the principles, the 11 principles, are helpful. And if you engage with her writing and her style, they could be beneficial. This concept of kind of like failing forward, she calls it losing forward. But, learning from your mistakes, learning from your failures, and continuing to push forward is interesting the way she writes it, but that's not a new concept either. There's a chapter on social media, which is way too specific to Moms Demand and gun control activism and advocacy. But one of the things I think, the last thing I'll finish on really quickly here, is she has a whole chapter on the importance of numbers and having your facts and having your data with you to back up whatever it is you're arguing, whatever it is you're trying to advance forward. And I think that's really applicable to any work situation, any life situation. Doing your research is something, obviously, as research consultants, we feel is very important. So that's a great lesson to take away from all of Shannon's stories, is to have the data, but also to have the stories. So she interweaves data that is significant to her argument and the stories of real human beings that have or have not been directly impacted by gun violence, but for whatever reason have decided to join Mom's Demand. And so that was, I think, really impactful and kind of a broad lesson that we can take from the book. She does deal pretty well with intersectionality and grappling with her own privilege as a white woman, which is something that she says she learned through reading the research and through meeting people. So data and stories, again, coming together to help her understand her own positioning in terms of this. Gun violence disproportionately affects marginalized groups, Black and brown people, non-white, non-Christian, non-heteronormative people, LGBTQ people, disproportionately impacted by gun violence in this country. And that's something she brings up and mentions, which I think is really important. Another thing that I thought was really interesting as I finish up, she talks about how they use SMART goals, which is something Dr. Kristen and I talk about every year, and the importance of SMART goals. But she calls them SMARTIE goals. They've added an I and an E at the end that stand for inclusive and equitable, which I think is really cool. So this directly impacts their hiring and training practices. And she talks a lot about the importance of listening to communities and people that are impacted by gun violence before dictating to them, which is a lesson we can take in any job or in any field or in any form of activism. And then at the end, she shifts towards self-care, which is also important for any business, any job, any life, particularly when you're working on something as serious as this issue. Making sure that you look after yourself so that you can look after others is also really important. So I think there are some important lessons in here. I've said the word important about 15 times. I know that. Lack of vocabulary this morning, apparently. There are some good lessons in here. I wish she would have been more explicit if it was directed at mothers, or if it wasn't specifically directed at mothers or for mothers as the primary audience. I would have liked to see some editing in the way that language was used, because there were a lot of times where I felt like, oh, should I be reading this book? She's not talking to me at all. I'm not a mother. But I am an empathetic and caring person who is interested in this topic. So that is the Abbey Research Reads review for Fight Like a Mother. There will be links below to where you can find this book if you decide to add it to your reading list. And we'll be back with another book in the coming weeks. That's all we've got for you. I'm Dr. Erin. I'll see you next time.